Hello everyone and welcome to our final review looking at the neutral cards for the Witchwood. We're going to be looking at the cards and rating them on a scale of 1 to 5 as we have been doing with all the classes. We have the scale is kind of like 1 is your trash cards like Magma Rager or Sneaky Devil. 2 is kind of your tech or maybe fringe cards like Black Knight or Dragon Slayer. 3 is kind of your playable cards or kind of neat cards that are popular in maybe a niche archetype, cards like Plated Beetle or Deadly Shot. At 4 we have your cards that are kind of deck defining or they're staple across multiple decks in a class like Gadgetan Auctioneer or Wandering Monster. And 5 we have kind of meta defining cards. These are the cards that not only affect how the decks in that class are built, but they affect how decks across multiple classes are built, how decks that are going to be coming up against these kind of cards choose to build their decks. So these are cards like Call to Arms or Void Lord. So let's get started with the neutrals. First up we have Azalina Soul Thief. Azalina Soul Thief is a 7 mana 3/3 legendary minion with Battle Cry, replace your hand with a copy of your opponent's. And we kind of saw this in the final reveal stream, and I think that somewhat convinced me about this card.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the whole idea of the reveal stream is obviously to showcase certain cards. As much as it did some pretty amusing things there, I still think most of the time the card's not particularly very good. I mean, it's kind of a refill in a way, so I see it being, filling a very niche role of being a sort of a tech option against control sometimes when you maybe want to steal one of their late game, well, when you want to steal, possibly late game threats and answers.
So, people often speak about it as like, and even we spoke about it in our first impressions video about somewhat like Divine Favor. It's kind of a refill late the game. But the big thing is actually, and this is really the one thing that I took away from the reveal stream, is that it was just giving the kind of more aggro deck, not necessarily, a bunch of useless tools. It was giving them, okay, the Shadow Walk worked well, but every other card in the hand was basically useless. And so that kind of was a bit of a problem. And it generally resulted in a scenario where you kind of got like a bunch of removal tools, which are not really helpful to you at that stage of the game. So for me, I think the Azalina Soul Thief is going to be even pretty mediocre in those positions as well. Obviously, it is neutral, so I'd rather have Divine Favor in my Paladin decks all the time to actually just draw cards that I put in my deck. So that's a big thing there. And I think the only kind of decks you'd want to use it against are late game control decks that have, let's say, a lot of big threats to actually win the game that you can steal. That's the only time you really want to use it. So for me, I think I'm going to give Azalina Soul Thief a 2 at best. I think almost leaning on a 1, but maybe there's some scenarios where it does fit that fringe or tech role that we kind of described for 2s.
Yeah, for me it's also a 2. It's not going to see play in every deck, but I mean, expect it to be, surprise. I can honestly see someone at some point being in a competitive event and winning a tournament with it, right?
Yeah, maybe. Next up we have Baku the Moon Eater. Baku the Moon Eater is a 9 mana 7/8 beast. It's a legendary obviously, and start of the game, if your deck has only odd cost cards, upgrade your hero power. So this is a card that's got a lot of hype, creating, as Blizzard put it, 9 new archetypes with a single card, which I think is a little bit over exaggeration. But Baku, the one thing that's super important and super cool about the design of this card, it's a card that limits how you can build your deck, like we've seen with the Princes before. But the big difference here is it isn't reliant on actually drawing the card. This effect will take place at the start of the game, and in fact you never want to draw Baku. You always want Baku to be your 30th card, because a 9 mana 7/8 is terrible, and that's really not what the card's about. The card is about the effect. And the big question here is what decks actually are going to want this upgraded hero power. It's the same kind of upgraded hero power we saw previously from Justicar, so that kind of gives us some indication as to which classes that hero power is quite strong in.
Yeah, so, I mean, with Justicar Trueheart from the Grand Tournament, if I remember correctly, Paladin sometimes used the Justicar.
Yeah.
Priest sometimes used it. And Warrior. Those were mainly your three classes that where they really, got, I think, I would say the most benefit out of the upgraded hero power, most.
Yeah, I think there's a slight difference in this one as well, in that you have access to that from the start of the game. With like Justicar, you needed to play it on turn 6 at the earliest, turn 5 with a coin, so you wouldn't have had access to it from the beginning. So I think that makes it better in certain classes where the hero power is a little bit more of a tempo play in the early game, or can better suit an early strategy. So for something like Paladin, summoning 2 dudes is pretty powerful when you have that available to you from turn 2 as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, Paladin, the fact that a lot of times, the hero power scene is a very low tempo option. I mean, whereas now, let's say in Paladin, if you, even on turn 2 hero power, and let's say maybe worst case turn 3 hero power, it's not as bad now because you're actually getting sort of quite, it might not be great, but it's not as terrible as just summoning 1/1/1. I mean, as obvious as it sounds.
Yeah, it's definitely a way of grinding out a lot of value with your hero power, and that's kind of what the mid-range paladins back in the day that ran Justicar kind of tended to do. So maybe we can see some kind of, I would think it's more of a mid-range Doodoo type deck with Baku. Yeah. But we've kind of spoken about Baku a little bit in a bunch of the other class reviews. So I don't really want to go too much into the decks. I think the one big thing to note with Baku is this card is going to be in the game for quite a while. Witchwood is the first first expansion of Year of the Raven. So it's going to be in for basically 2 whole years. It's going to be in for this whole Year of the Raven as well as the next standard year. So that means that there might well be these kind of odd decks as we're getting more and more cards and more options in the in the different mana cost slots for all the decks. So I think for that reason, I mean, Baku is by its definition deck defining. So for me, it's going to be a 4.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you there. I mean, the fact that it's sort of it's constrained. You never want to put in a deck where you're not playing out only cards, right?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, that's taken for granted. Yeah. Next up, we have Gen Greymane, the counterpart to Baku. Gen is a 6 mana, 6/5 legendary at the start of the game. If your deck has only even cost cards, your starting hero power costs 1. So the thing here with Gen is, personally, I don't feel that a reduced hero power is as important as is as impactful as an upgraded hero power, because you can still only use your hero power once a turn. That's quite an important thing to note. And for most of the hero powers, even if you're just paying 1 mana for them, they're not really that great. They're somewhat limited in their use. So I think Gen Greymane fulfills a lot of the kind of same things we mentioned with Baku. It'll get better in the future. It's going to be around for a long time, and maybe there's some decks in the future, but for me, I just don't think the reduced hero power is as important as the upgraded one. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going to be giving Gen Greymane a 2.
Yeah, for me it's also a 2. I just don't think that payoff. I mean, like you said, I think the payoff of an upgraded hero power is far better than a 1 mana one.
Yeah, I think some of the other even cost payoff cards we've seen, I would arguably play those over playing Gen, in the way that, like, those are the cards that will lead me to the even cost archetype rather than Gen.
Right.
So like the eel that we saw in Shaman, for instance. So that's one of the reasons I also kind of don't think Gen is necessarily that great, and that's why I don't even think it's deck defining for the even cost decks. Next up, we have Countess Ashmore. Countess Ashmore is kind of the curator of the set. Countess Ashmore is a 7 mana 6/6 legendary minion with Battle Cry. Draw a Rush, Lifesteal, and Death Rattle card from your deck. So much like Curator drew 3 or up to 3 cards based on the tribes of the minions, this can draw you based on the mechanics on those cards. So importantly, this can draw weapons and spells as well if they happen to have Lifesteal or Death Rattle. I can't, there's no reason for a spell or a weapon to have Rush, so you'll only really ever be getting Lifesteal or Death Rattle spells or weapons. So, Countess Ashmore, I know you're a big fan of it.
Yeah, for me it's a 5. I think this is a great card. I think it's a kind of card that you can in nearly any deck you can consider sort of putting in a package of looking at a Death Rattle, Rush, Lifesteal package. As we said, Lifesteal I think is probably sort of the most scarce of the 3 mechanics. So I mean, I could even see a lot of times you just put in Countess, a rush card, and Death Rattle, and I think it would be quite good.
I kind of differ in my opinion. I think Countess Ashmore is something that will get better over time when we get more Rush and Lifesteal, but right now I think that generally the Rush and Lifesteal minions are pretty poor. Outside of Warrior, I think that it's not really worth putting any of the neutral Rushes in your deck. So I actually think Rush is almost just as bad as Lifesteal when it comes to finding a minion to fulfill it. And a lot of the Lifesteal cards are pretty underwhelming too. So I think a lot of the times, I'm only really finding it where Countess Ashmore is going to draw me 1 card. And a little bit like Curator when it first came into the game, might not see play for a while. Might need to kind of take a little bit of time to really find its place in the different decks. And I think we're going to need to see some better neutral Rush or Lifesteal cards, or just better cards in all the classes and with those 2 mechanics to actually see Countess Ashmore seeing much play. So for me, I'm actually going to give it like a 3 now, but I definitely think it's going to lead towards, a 4, maybe even a 5 if we get enough good cards with those mechanics. But once again, it's going to be around for a long time, and that's the important thing here. Next up, we have Dollmaster Dorian. Dollmaster Dorian is a 5-mana 2/6 legendary minion. Whenever you draw a minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it. So, this can kind of obviously synergize with a lot of the minions that have extra effects or death rattles, where getting the 1/1 copy isn't as bad. Cards like Obsidian Statue, or like Ysera, Lich King, where they give you cards. But the big issue with Dollmaster Dorian is that you need to actually draw those cards with Dollmaster Dorian in play. And that makes it kind of difficult to fulfill it a lot of the time.
Yeah, for me, it's a case of the effect is obviously really powerful, but there's currently in Hearthstone, there's no real way to guarantee what your next card is, right? There's no, we don't have any rearrangement effects or mechanics where you can put a card out on top of a library, or you can change the order to guarantee you that you're going to be drawing it. So the fact that for a while, I mean, he's going to be his stats are, if I remember correctly, his stats are quite poor.
Yeah, he's a 5-mana 2/6.
He's a 5-mana 2/6. So how long is a 5-mana 2/6 going to stick around? And not to mention that while he's on board, he does nothing.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sold on Dollmaster Dorian.
Yeah, so generally you need to play him in the same turn you're actually playing some kind of draw as well, which is something important to note. 6 damage is not too difficult to deal right now. Even with some of the rush cards, like Swift Messenger we'll see, which is a 4-mana 2/6 or 6/2 rush minion. And I think the one time you can kind of decide what it's going to get you from your deck is if you actually are able to put cards back into your deck with a card like Baleful Butler, which we'll see just now. That's the one kind of.
But then it has to be like your last card, right? Like the problem is, it increases the statistics marginally.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still not like the only time you can guarantee is if literally it's like your last card.
Exactly, you can guarantee it in those scenarios, but that's getting it as your 30th card is not exactly ideal. So yeah, I don't think Dollmaster Dorian is particularly great. Certainly not now with the synergies, that exist for it at the moment. So I'm gonna give it a 2.
Yeah, for me it's also I think I also gave it a 2. Although actually, I mean, it might even just be a 1.
Yeah, it honestly might well be close to a 1, but I I think there could be some synergies for it, but it's difficult to see how those synergies are actually going to kind of come about and work consistently. Next up, we have the card we were just talking about as well, Baleful Banker. Not Baleful Butler, although he does look like he could be a butler too. Baleful Banker is a 2-mana 2/2 epic minion with Battle Cry. Choose a friendly minion, shuffle a copy of it into your deck. This card kind of most reminds me of a reverse Gnome Ferratu in a way.
Yeah.
You're putting extra cards in your deck rather than removing cards from your opponent's deck, which is only ever really relevant in sort of control mirrors that go to fatigue. There's not a lot of matchups traditionally in Hearthstone that go to fatigue, so Baleful Banker is a little bit weak there. Unless you can find a way to tutor out the specific minion you're putting back in your deck, and you have some synergy with playing that multiple times. But I actually think Baleful Banker is a pretty strong card, and I think there will be a lot of good uses for it in a lot of control decks. If we ever get to the kind of fabled control metas, or at least it's a good tech card for tournaments and that kind of thing.
I mean, as you compared it to, I think it suffers from the same issue that Gnome-Ferratu does. That in the games where, let's say, you shuffle a high impact minion into your deck and you draw it within a very short time afterwards, it's obviously going to be quite nutty. Obviously, if you shuffle a second copy of a legendary minion or whatever, yeah. But the problem is, in a lot of games that don't go to fatigue, you can just consider that basically Baleful Banker is just putting a card, let's say, in the bottom 10 cards of your deck, you're never going to see anyway. So you've just played 2 mana for a 2/2. That's, for most of the time, not going to do anything. So, yeah. I mean, I understand, and I think, there is a niche where it could be useful in control decks, like as anti-control tech. But for me, because of that nicheness, I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's also a card that can work in some kind of mill decks if we find any in the future. With Cold Light Oracle rotating out, those are not particularly, it's not looking particularly good for mill. So I think that Baleful Banker is actually pretty good, and I think it will definitely see play. I kind of agree with you in that by the kind of buckets we've given, with the 2 being a niche and kind of tech card, and that is kind of where Baleful Banker falls, because it is also worse on 2 than something like Gnome Ferratu, just stat wise, and I think it is true that it kind of falls in that, but I actually think it's a pretty decent card, so I'm going to give it a 3. I think there's enough times you can make good use of it that even outside those specific matchups, it can actually see some play. And then moving on to our next card, we have Mossy Horror. Mossy Horror is a 6-mana 2/7 epic minion with Battle Cry. Destroy all other minions with 2 or less attack. Kind of a Shadow Word horror on a stick. Without much synergy, I would say, outside of Warlock now, with the Curse of Weakness that reduces attack. That's kind of the only board-wide attack reduction spell in the game right now, with Pint-Sized Potion rotating out to Wild at least.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad card. Like, even though it's very limiting, obviously 2 or less attack, I think it's a potentially nice option for any deck. Considering it's a neutral, that any deck can essentially put this as a sort of if aggro becomes a problem, right? It's mainly an anti-aggro tool, I think, and it kills all those spreading plague scarabs, like
Sure.
kills all those void walkers. So I think, for me, I'm going to give it a 3 because I think it is a decent card that I think could always float. I mean, it's probably a 3 leading close to a 2 because as a tech card, but I think it's like a decent card all around.
Yeah. I think it's a niche card, kind of a niche tech card at best. I don't think that it's going to be very reliable to get this effect off, and I don't think most of the time against most decks you're going to kill more than 2 minions. Only against very token heavy decks is it really going to be that great. So for me, I'm going to have to say Mossy Horror is a 2. Next up we have one of the neutral rush cards that can work with Countess Ashmore. We have Muck Hunter. Muck Hunter is a 5-mana 5/8 with Rush and Battle Cry. summon 2/1 Mucklings for your opponent.
Yeah. So this kind of, when I look at all the neutral cards, this is kind of the card that will probably the most of the time be the token rush card you include currently, because I think it's definitely one of the stronger ones.
Yeah.
Besides some of the class specific ones, but as a neutral one, I think it's probably the best neutral rush.
Yeah, it might well be. The 2 Mucklings is definitely a downside against certain decks, but in some of the decks where you play Muck Hunter, you're definitely going to want to have some synergy with it. Like, you can pair it with any kind of 1 damage board AoE to kill them. And then you can kind of turn it into like a big swipe if you think about it in that way. Any kind of board like 1 damage AoE plus Muck Hunter is kind of like a neutral swipe in 2 cards, which is
Okay.
is something. Yeah. So I mean, I think Muck Hunter could have some kind of use. I agree that it's probably about the best of the neutral rush cards. So for me, I'm going to give it a 3. But I'm not expecting to see a lot of Muck Hunters once, let's say, the meta settles and people are done testing it.
Yeah, I think it's a 3. I mean, it's also, I think it's one of those cards that could easily become better or worse as more as the next expansions release.
Yeah. Obviously, it's basically kind of like a removal spell that might leave behind a minion. So for that, it also depends on what the kind of popular minions are that it can kill. That's obviously, a relevant factor as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to see inclusion as a 29th, 30th card because people want to play Countess Ashmore a lot of the time, I feel. So that's probably why you're going to see more Muck Hunters than the card probably deserves to see play. Because when you're drawing it kind of with the Countess Ashmore, it's not so bad, but yeah. Next up, we have Nightmare Amalgam. Nightmare Amalgam is a 3-mana, 3/4 epic minion that is an elemental, mech, demon, murloc, dragon, beast, pirate, and totem. So it's all the kind of types races we have in the game right now, barring Egg, which is apparently now a race, but according to the latest patch notes.
I'm not sure if that's a joke or if they've been serious.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either. I haven't actually looked in-game to see if that's true. But anyway, so Nightmare Amalgam, the tastiest food for all the crabs. What are your thoughts on Nightmare Amalgam?
Yeah, so like on the one side, it's vulnerable to every sort of crab and every sort of hate effect, right? Because it is every creature type.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, a 3-mana 3/4, pretty average stats for a 3-drop. But the fact is, it can essentially be an activator for any of these said tribes, which I think means it will see play in quite a few decks for quite a few different reasons. I think it will see play in some decks because the deck needs elementals, or the deck needs murlocs, or the deck needs dragons. So for me, for this reason, because of its versatility, I can see it being a 3. Like I rated a 3. It can obviously, if we are in a meta where crabs are dominant, then obviously this card becomes really terrible because it gets eaten by every crab.
Yeah. I think also what it does quite well is it brings like 2 tribes together. It's in many ways the peacemaker of 2 tribes, right? Because it can help give you synergy in 2 of the tribes. Let's say you're playing like Cathedral Gargoyle, right? And that needs an activation from a dragon, but then you want to play like an elemental on 4. Nightmare Amalgam kind of helps it because it does both those jobs. It acts as the dragon in your hand when you played your Cathedral Gargoyle, and then it acts as the elemental you played last turn for your, let's say, your 4-mana cost elemental. Or the Tolvia Stone Shaper, that kind of card. That the cards that care about those activations. So yeah, I think it could be quite useful. I obviously there are the times where you'll not want to include this because it gets crab too much, and it is a very valuable minion to crab at a 3-mana 3/4. You're removing quite a lot of stats off the board. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, quick confirmation from Pandemonia there that egg is not actually a race, and instead we just got trolled by the Hearthstone patch comments or patch notes.
I don't think it was the hot part. I think it was the official patch notes.
Oh, was it the official patch notes? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm trying to work out maybe they would do it for the because I think it was got to do with the Easter event. You know, that talks about that. Obviously, they were talking about.
But Easter's like come and gone. They're late on Easter. Anyway, so yeah, Nightmare Amalgam is not an egg, but it is all the other things. And I mean, I think it's definitely a card that, with the limited options we have now to activate a lot of those tribes, might see some play. But it's something you kind of reluctantly put in your deck because you have to rather than you want to. Unless, of course, it is that one that's kind of bridging the gap between the two tribes. So, yeah, I think I'm also going to give Nightmare Amalgam a 3. I think it helps to make some other archetypes possible, but it certainly isn't something that pushes you into any given archetype.
And the last thing is, I think as more cards are released, there's always a chance, you don't need it anymore, right?
Yeah.
They might produce a better 3-drop.
Yeah, or just, a better dragon, a better elemental, and a better pirate. I mean, they've been pretty consistent in still printing all these archetypes ever since these tribes since they were first introduced. I mean, we're getting elementals still in this set after they were introduced in Angora, and we're still getting mechs after they were introduced in GVG a very long time ago. So, they do kind of keep printing these tribes, even though sometimes in like the Witchwood, dragons don't make that much sense, but they find a way to print them. Next up, we have Sandbinder. Sandbinder is a 4-mana 2/4 epic with Battle Cry, draw an elemental from your deck. So, another kind of possible synergy card. I think for me, this really sticks out as a card to help tutor you for, let's say, elementals that can be useful in combos, like Radiant Elemental is the first one that kind of sticks out to me, or maybe some of the Shaman elementals like Grumble or Murmuring Elemental, those kind of things. And I think Sandbinder is a pretty interesting card. I think these kind of very targeted draws can be quite powerful. And it can also help make your curve a little bit smoother with your elementals. The big problem is, of course, it's not an elemental itself, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, because if you have 2 in your deck, you don't want to draw the other Sandbinder when you play Sandbinder. But you also, it doesn't really fit a curve elemental deck. It needs to be a deck that wants to do some kind of combo or fetch some really important elemental in the deck.
Yeah, I find it interesting that obviously that Blizzard's trying to introduce more, tutor effects, but I wonder sort of if they will kind of know the sort of the can of worms, the proverbial can of worms they're opening, because now they have to kind of be mindful of the power level of any card that can now be fetched. They have to kind of be careful that doesn't create some combo, right? That you play. You fetch it, because I mean, at the end of the day, you can easily control what elemental is if you only put one elemental in your deck.
Yeah.
Sandbinder is guaranteed to fetch it.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you combine a whole bunch of these sort of tutor effects, you could easily end up in a situation where there's a combo deck that's way too consistent.
Yeah. And which kind of seems weird for me for Blizzard. They've kind of consistently hated on combo decks and nerfs they've made and statements they've made. And then they kind of seem to be printing more of these targeted draws. I mean, the Sandbinder is not the only one, even in this set. So, with a set that's going to be around for so long, that does seem like a bit of an odd decision for them. It seems like it's naturally going to restrict their space a bit. But at the same time, I do like it because these kind of effects do lead to some interesting combos.
And you like combos.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of Sandbinder. I don't quite see the deck for it yet, unless it's the Elemental Shaman with the, Jabberwock kind of combo we spoke about in that review, or possibly finding its way into like the Priest one that we spoke about with the Radiant Elementals, but then that would be maybe a slightly different version of the deck. So, I mean, Sandbinder, yeah, it seems like an interesting card to me, but I'm just going to give it a 3 because I think, once again, it finds kind of its way into niche archetypes, but it isn't really going to push you too much into any one of those particular combo decks.
So for me, as a result of it being a very niche, I think for me it kind of falls solidly in the sort of two group.
Yeah. Okay. Next up we have Splitting Festeroot. Splitting Festeroot is an 8-mana 4/4 epic minion with Death Rattle. Summon 2/2 Splitting Saplings. So these are 2/2s that splits again into 1/1s. I think this is pretty terrible. Arguably worse than Violet Worm because of how low impact the first body itself is. I don't see any particular reason you want to have this kind of, bad minion that gets slightly better when it goes wider and then maybe slightly better again. I think it's terrible. 8 mana, 12 stats in such a slow form. Splitting Festeroot is a solid 1 for me.
Yeah, it's solid 1 for me. And the worst part is, like, even if you think about, this might be decent in Wild, like with Bards or something, the worst part is, like, there's just so many better big guys in Wild as well, right? Yeah. So, solid a 1 from me as well.
Yeah. Next up, we have Voodoo Doll, a card we mentioned a few times in a lot of our class reviews and the kind of class deck lists we built. Voodoo Doll is a 3-mana 1/1 epic minion with Battle Cry. Choose a minion, Death Rattle, destroy the chosen minion. So if you combine Voodoo Doll with something like the Mage Hero power, you can basically kill off a minion for 5 mana. Or if you combine it with like Whirlwind effects, you can kill it. You can kill it off with that, or any Defile is another kind of combo. Mortal Coil. So there's quite a few ways to kill off your own Voodoo Doll. And I think it's a really interesting design to have this kind of removal in the form of a minion that you kind of need to combine it with something to get it to be immediate. But even if it's not immediate, sometimes it can be okay if you kind of just get to kill it off next turn.
I mean, the closest thing we've had to this in the past, which didn't seem almost any play, was Moat Lurker. Yeah. But the problem with that, obviously, was that it had the drawback of when you killed the Moat Lurker died, it brought back the minion. Yeah. Not to mention it being a 6-mana 3/3, whereas I think just Voodoo Doll is just 100 times better. So for me, I think it's just so strong in so many different classes, it gets a 4 from me.
Yep, I definitely agree. I think Voodoo Doll, honestly, I think it's like possibly one of the strongest neutrals. So like it almost kind of borders on a 5, but I kind of do have to agree that it's a 4 simply because I don't think it's going to be that meta defining. But it's definitely going to discourage you from playing any big kind of big dumb minions, let's say. It's definitely going to make cards like Splintergraft worse, for example. Not that
Splintergraft is actually kind of hedges its bets because it gets the dudes that when it dies.
My point is, you're probably not going to get the combo with Splintergraft because of Voodoo Doll. It's going to kill the thing. And yeah, I mean, okay, it depends what you're getting with the Splintergraft. But anyway, my point is, Voodoo Doll is very good at killing big dumb guys that don't have much other kind of effect. Not something that's been that popular in Hearthstone before, but I think the big thing that Voodoo Doll is with Frostage Jaina, that's the huge synergy that I see because it gets you the elemental at the same time. So I think Voodoo Doll could be pretty impactful. I'm going to say a 4 because I don't want to give it the utmost high rating because, Call to Arms.
You're not going to build a deck around it, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, it's a very powerful card, but it's not the deck. It's not a card where you build a deck around it. It's a good card you can put into most decks.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm going to give it a 4, even though I do really like the card. Next up, we have Witch's Cauldron. Witch's Cauldron is a 3-mana 0/4 minion with it's epic. After a friendly minion dies, add a random shaman spell to your hand. So the worst Cult Master, because random shaman spells are probably worse than the cards you're putting in your deck, especially in any kind of minion-heavy deck where you want to kind of trade minions like this. So Witch's Cauldron is a solid 1 from me.
Yeah, 1 from me as well. I mean, not to mention, there are some really bad shaman spells.
Yeah. But I mean, we kind of go over that a little bit in the shaman review as well. So yeah, check that one out if you want to see how bad the shaman spells are. Next up, we have Worgen Abomination. Worgen Abomination is a 7-mana 6/6 epic minion. At the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to all other damaged minions. I am not much of a fan of Worgen Abomination. Some people kind of compare it to Baron Geddon, but I think it's very much more difficult to get Worgen Abomination to kind of be activated than it is to have Baron Geddon that can come down on an empty board and clear up minions. So yeah, I'm not that much of a fan of Worgen Abomination. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Initially, I thought would be decent, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, Baron Geddon's probably just better most of the times. Primordial Drake is probably just better a lot of the times. So I think, for me, it gets a 2 because I think there is maybe some fringe scenarios where you just need that extra removal for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And obviously in Warrior, it obviously potentially combos well with Warrior's effect, like Whirlwind or Warpath.
Yeah. I think it combos as well with like the weapon. If you set that up, the Bloodfin Razor, as a way to kind of have the minions damaged. But yeah, I don't think Worgen Abomination is particularly strong, so I'm also going to give it a 2. Next up, we have our first rare minion, Chief Inspector. Chief Inspector is a 5-mana 4/6. With the battle cry, destroy all secrets. Eater of Secrets rotating out. This is the token secret crab they've given us. And this one's a little bit better in many ways because its stats are not so bad in the matchups where you don't see the secrets, but it is the definition of a tech card. So it's a solid 2.
Yeah, solid 2. And also, I mean, obviously the relevance or the frequency of it will obviously depend on, the secret decks, how prevalent they are. And the fact that, Ice Block specifically is going to Hall of Fame, I mean, honestly, the main reason you play, in decks really played, whether it was Eater of Secrets or if you go back further, Kazan Mystic, was literally for Ice Block.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it got value in Secret against Secret Paladins or against Hunter, but honestly, the main reason you ran it was because you wanted to win against any form of slurp, whether it was Freeze Mage or Control Mage. So the fact that that's retained to Wild, even if Secret decks are prevalent, I'm not sure how good Chief Inspector will even be.
Yep, I agree. Against faster secret decks, also it comes down a bit later, which is a bit of an issue. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Chief Inspector is particularly good. Once again, exactly, it is a tech card, so it can just be a 2. Next up, we have Gilnean Royal Guard. Gilnean Royal Guard is an 8-mana 3/8 with Divine Shield and Rush. Each turn this is in your hand, swap its attack and health. So one of the kind of Worgen flippy cards, as you
Swappy cards.
Swappy cards. I prefer
Swappy
flippy.
Cards.
Flippy.
Well, how's it flipping? It's swapping.
Well,
this is not magic.
Okay, fine. I do think of it like the magic werewolf cards, which are flippy cards. Okay, fine. Swappy card. Gilnean Royal Swappy card is a 8/3 when it's in its Worgen form and a 3/8 in its human form. I think both are kind of bad. 8 mana for 8 damage with that kind of leaves behind a pretty weak minion with 3 health.
That's by far the best form.
Yeah, it's definitely the best side, but that's still pretty bad. At 8 mana, there's a lot better removal spells. I mean, you could just play Twisting Nether and that kills multiple minions as well. I mean, yes, there's some times in which Swappy Guard here will be better than Twisting Nether.
But I'm not convinced.
No, I want to be able to do more with the rest of my mana when I remove something than just developing an 8/3. And obviously, when it's a 3/8, it's a pretty terrible removal card. So.
Oh, because I mean, if on turn 8, all you're doing is killing 3 health minions,
and you're only killing one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No. I'll pass, thanks.
Yeah, Gilnean Royal Guard.
It's a 1. It's a straight 1 garbage card.
Yeah, definitely agree. Next up, we have Lifedrinker. Lifedrinker. Okay, we mentioned it in the Shaman Jabberwock deck. That's about the only particular usage I see for Lifedrinker. Some people have kind of said in aggro decks, it's at least guaranteed damage. In something like Hunter, it's probably better than a flanking strike. It's better than hero power and a 2-drop on turn 4. So maybe in those kind of aggro decks, obviously if it's like an aggro race you're going into, it can be good. But most of the time it's just kind of weak on the board and it's going to result in you losing the board. And that's usually not something aggro decks want to do. So I'm
I mean,
not
this
really
is basically
sure.
a cheaper version of Nightblade.
Yes, but
And I'm not.
you
That
get 3
card has
health.
seen. Okay, but I mean, if you're talking about aggro deck, that has never ever been relevant in an aggro deck majority of the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't
So,
think Lifedrinker is very
so
good.
outside of the combo potentials, with the Battlecry
Yes.
shenanigans, uh, for me, it's a 1. I don't think it even gets a 2 just because of that solo interaction.
Yeah, I think outside of the combo, it's definitely a 1. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's really what it's worth rating it. It's kind of just a card that facilitates the combo. You could theoretically play Nightblade in that combo deck as well.
Yeah.
So it's not even
And
that
Nightblade
important.
does not get any higher ratings
No.
because of that.
No. Yeah, so I'm going to agree it is a 1 for Lifedrinker. Next up, we have Mad Hatter. Mad Hatter is a 4-mana 3/2 rare minion with Battlecry. Randomly toss 3 hats to other minions. Each hat gives +1/+1. This is a great card. One of the coolest cards in the set. Okay, that's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but it's definitely a fun card, and I'm very excited to see what the animation is like.
Yeah, I'm curious to see the animation, and like if they're cool hats. Like I'm very interested to see
like snapbacks and cool hats.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Or if it's like a bowling hat or a fedora or what hats he throws. But
sure fedoras
like
are cool,
it's a really cool design and it's like a really cool fun card. But outside of that, I don't think the card is particularly very good. The fact that it's other minions and not friendly minions means that you kind of need to be ahead on board to start off with.
I think, yeah.
And so for me, it's a win more card.
It is to a certain extent. I think in some ways it's like if you are playing a deck where you can make value trades and your minions will survive, then Mad Hatter works well in that kind of deck because you don't have the chance of.
Card.
Well, it's not win more. It's more like assuring the board for you. Because if you play it and it only buffs your minions, it is 4 mana 6/5 worth of stats, which is kind of split out amongst your board and can kind of make your board more resilient to, let's say, some AoE or something like that. So I think Mad Hatter might have some application in some niche decks. So I actually kind of give it a 3, but it's definitely a weak 3 for me.
It's a 1. I'm curious though. The wording is not very clear. If you only have one other minion, for example, does it toss 3 hats to that minion?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's how it'll work.
So and if you have, let's say, there's a potential for it to toss twice the same one. So let's say you have 3 other minions. Is it guaranteed to give 1 to each, or is it possible?
I don't think so.
Is a possibility that all 3 hats can land on one minion?
I'm pretty sure it'll be the same way that the bombs, for example, on like on the other Mad cards work. Mad Bomber and all those kind of Mad Bomber. That one had 4, but you know what I mean. What are they called? The 2 mana 3/2 and
Mad Bomber.
Is that Mad Bomber?
It's Mad Bomber and Mad Bomber.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of the other one, the one that the 4 mana 3/3 that did 4 damage.
Oh, Bomb Lobber.
Bomb Lobber, that was okay. So yeah, it works like the other Mad cards where there's no guarantee about what it can hit really. In this case, the only limit is that it only hits other minions. It will never buff itself, much like pretty much the other Mad cards actually. That's kind of true. Yeah. So I mean, realistically, I don't think we're gonna see much play from Mad Hatter, but people are definitely gonna try it because it's cool.
I want to see the animation. I'm curious as well.
Yeah. Next up, we have Night Prowler. Night Prowler is a 4 mana 6/6 beast, but it's only a 6/6 if it's the only minion on the battlefield because it has a battle cry that gives it that +3/+3. So at base stats, it's a 4 mana 3/3, and most of the time, it's going to be a 4 mana 3/3 because there's not a lot of times when there's no minions on either side of the board. Either you have to trade off your minions and then you play this, and then I would rather trade minions, have them survive, and play a Mad Hatter than play a Night Prowler.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's very rare where there will be nothing in play on turn 4.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna be striving to be ahead on board, right? So I mean, you also purposely don't want to try and set this up either, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult to kind of build your deck to make this work unless you're playing like AoEs and stuff. And if you're playing AoEs and you're kind of a control deck, there's not really much point in playing a 4 mana 6/6. I I don't really see how that's going
You
to
could probably,
be your game
probably
plan.
won't be playing it later anyway, right? So you could probably just play a bigger thing anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a card that could maybe see some play, but overall, I'm going to give it a 1. I think it's pretty bad. And at first, like, I was kind of excited about it, and then I kind of realized actually these scenarios probably don't happen all that often.
Yeah, for me, it's also a solid 1.
Next up, we have Phantom Militia, one of the very first cards revealed from the Witchwood. It's a 3-mana 2/4 with Echo and Taunt. So obviously pretty understated. We spoke about this in the impressions, and I don't think much has changed now that we know all the cards in the set. I'm really struggled to find a decent deck for Phantom Militia.
I mean, maybe Taunt Warrior.
Yeah,
so
it's the only kind of possible option.
Because it's not it's the same. I mean, 3-mana for 2/4 Taunt is not that terrible and has Echo. I'm gonna give it a 2 because I think there's some niche times where you just want to spam, 2 or 3 of these, just to stay alive. So I'm not completely sold on it, but yeah, I'm gonna give it a 2.
I think in most decks where you'd want to play this as a defensive tool, you'd rather play Saronite Chain Gang. Until Saronite Chain Gang rotates out, and then we have to use Phantom Militia. And if we haven't got any better tools than that by then, I don't know. I'd rather play Tar Creeper in most scenarios as well. So I think Phantom Militia is a 1. Outside of maybe a Taunt Quest Warrior where you want to use it, but I don't even know if it makes that cut over something like
Stonehill
Defender, yeah. So, yeah, Phantom Militia, that's going to be a no from me, which means a 1. Next up, we have Scaleworm. Scaleworm's a 4-mana 4/4 beast with Battle Cry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and rush. So this is obviously a kind of Dragon Matters card. We're struggling to find, I think, enough dragons to make Dragons Matter card work right now. But Scaleworm is definitely something that I think will be better as we go forward. And I imagine we're going to get at least a couple dragons in the next couple expansions. So I think Scaleworm is pretty good. And it's a 4-mana 4/4 that I'm going to give a 4.
Yeah, I give it 4. But only, I mean, like you mentioned, only obviously where you can consistently, put in a dragon deck where it's a 4-mana 5/4 with rush.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically why I'm giving it a 4. Like we said, right now, a lot of the dragon decks are going to be quite difficult to make work because of rotation and, limited dragons available. But I think, in a deck where you have dragon synergy working, Scaleworm's a 4.
Yeah, and it also works quite well in Spiteful decks because it operates in some ways like a spell. A lot of the rush cards kind of do. They're kind of like removal-ish spells, and Scaleworm works quite well there where you don't have access to those generally cheaper removal spells. So Scaleworm can kind of fill a good job if you can make a Dragon Spiteful deck work, which is probably in Priest at this kind of stage. Next up, we have Witchwood Grizzly. Witchwood Grizzly is a 5-mana 3/2 rare with Taunt and Battle Cry. Lose 1 health for each card in your opponent's hand. So this is losing health on the Grizzly, not your own health total. And that health is kind of a permanent health loss. You can't silence it off, I don't believe.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the idea.
And it can't be healed up.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'm curious if this, let's say, minion gets returned, I'm assuming it retains, it doesn't, reset.
No, it would
or
reset.
If it gets shuffled into deck.
If it's re-summoned from death, it'll be a 3/12. I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay, but I'm saying if it gets bounced to your hand, does it stay as...
Oh, yeah, it'll reset.
As let's say, a 3/10, for example, or 3/8.
No, I'm fairly sure it'll reset, like every effect we've seen.
No, but if it's returned... No, because the whole point is, as soon as the Battle Cry loses the health and it becomes that. It's much like when you, for example, if you remember, if you return Drill of Claw to your hand.
You mean, it transforms.
Yeah, and you got a transformed 4/6 to your hand.
If that's true, the card's a lot worse than I think it is, because then...
Because you get what I'm saying, is that, literally, the card could become, when it's in play, it becomes a 5-mana 3/10, and then it gets returned as a 3/10.
Yeah, so then if cards like Witching Hour and that don't work with it, I think Witchwood Grizzly is a 1, to be honest.
So I'm not sure. So that's why I'm giving it a 2.
Yeah.
Because I think that potentially, it is a potential aggro tool, but like I'm not sure if these interactions have been clarified yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm not 100% sure on that. I think 2 might be a safe rating for now, but I definitely think if resurrecting it and when it gets returned to your hand, it doesn't go back to 12 health, then I think it's a 1. If it is okay when it's resurrected, I think it's a 2 because it can kind of make some niche decks work, mostly with Witching Hour that we see at the moment. But yeah, I'm not overly convinced by Witchwood Grizzly.
Just a random sort of. There's a potential synergy with Master Oakheart, though. By the way.
Okay, yeah, true. That does kind of work to bring out 3/12 Torrent. Which I think probably one of the best 3 attacks outside of maybe Voidlord. Next up, we have Witchwood Piper. Witchwood Piper is a 4-mana 3/3 rare minion with Battle Cry. Draw a minion from your deck with the lowest mana cost. So another kind of tutorish type effect. In this case, it's the lowest mana cost minion. So once again, you can kind of put less minions on your deck to make this work. If you even draw both the Witchwood Pipers, you can start picking big minions out of your deck. Could be anything up to like a Malygos at 9 mana, right? If you can keep your deck at, that sort of low on overall minions. So I actually kind of like Witchwood Piper. I think it can be playable in some of those kind of niche decks where you can make use of the tutor effect. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 3.
Yeah, for that reason, I'm going to give it a 2 because I think of its nicheness, right? Like, as we described, it's a fringe sort of, for me, it's a very niche card. So
I don't see it as like fringe or tech. I see it as pretty solid in those kind of niche archetypes, which is kind of why I'm saying a 3. Next up, we have Blackwalled Pixie. Blackwalled Pixie, a 3-mana 3/4 with Battle Cry, Refresh Your Hero Power. Actually, like on revision of this card, I think it's pretty bad. I don't think you ever really care that much about the Battle Cry, so it's largely just a 3-mana 3/4 because to make the Battle Cry work, you can't work in odd decks where you have a 1-mana cost hero power in even decks, because it's odd. So in odd decks is kind of the best value you're going to get from it outside of upgraded hero powers from like Death Knights or Quest Warrior or those kind of things. Outside of those applications, it's going to be like 7 mana to use your hero power twice, and get a 3/4, and that's pretty bad to me. I'm not convinced.
I'm gonna give it a 2 because I think there's like maybe in the future there's some sort of right now you have the Taunt, you have Sulfurous, the Rag hero power. With doing paying 7 mana for doing it twice is not that bad.
Sure.
But like I say, I think in the future there might be some niche applications. So
yeah,
for me, I think that's why I'm going to give it a 2 because the 3-mana 3/4 is not horrible, and but like you say, right now, outside of Taunt Warrior, there's not much reason why you want to pay 7 mana to do your hero power twice and play a 3/4.
Yeah, I think it's much worse than something like Auction Master Beardo, which was easier to kind of repeat the hero power, which we saw in like OTK Paladin. So I just don't think Blackwalled Pixie is good at all. Like even in the future, you would need to have really overpowered hero powers for Blackwalled Pixie to be good. So I'm struggling to even see future application for it. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with a 1 for Blackwalled Pixie. Next up, we have Cauldron Elemental. Cauldron Elemental is an 8-mana 7/7 common elemental with your other elementals have +2 attack. Not
Elemental Lord.
Yeah, pretty much. Not something I can see many elemental decks naturally putting in their deck. Something that can occasionally be discovered from a Servant of Kalamos, and something that will also come off of Spiteful Summoner occasionally. It's kind of an okay minion to come off Spiteful Summoner. When you're getting a 7/7 on turn 6, plus the 4/4, then you're not too upset. It's not a particularly high roll, but I think it's decent enough for Spiteful decks. It's better than getting a King Togwaggle.
Yes.
Or a Bone Man.
It's still, I'm so confused to why they made this card because, like, if you do want to make an elemental deck, you generally want it to be a more mid-range or aggressive deck. So if you wanted to have a plus attack, you want it to be a lot cheaper. If you wanted to have...
I think it would be dangerous to make it less than 5 mana where you could play 2 of them. It's kind of like a pseudo Bloodlust for elementals.
Yeah, I mean,
So
like,
I don't think
if
they
you had
could
made
put
it
it on
cheaper and only
achievement.
given +1 attack, I think it would have been alright.
Yeah.
But like 8 mana, like making it 8 mana, I think it's absolute garbage. Like, you don't want to play this, like, unless you literally the other options of Servant of Kalamos are exceptionally terrible and you just need a big body. Like, you never want to run this card in your. I don't believe you ever want to run this card in your deck.
I
Uh,
agree.
so for me, it's a 1.
Yep, I'm gonna agree. Also a 1. Next up, we have Clockwork Automaton. Clockwork Automaton's a 5 mana 4/4 mech it's a common and it has double the damage and healing of your hero power. So it works best with Priest and Mage and Blood Reaver Gul'dan, where it kind of does both
Oh
sides.
my.
There is actually an OTK combo with Blood Reaver Gul'dan, I believe, where you have to do like 1 turn setups, I think. So it's not quite an OTK combo. It requires like 1 turn setup. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's out there. I saw the infographic for it. It's not that good though.
If the graphic for it, that kind of already,
Yeah, it's like a
tells you.
5-6 card combo. It's just weird how many combos there are in this set. I feel it's like unusual for Blizzard. But I don't think Clockwork Automaton is particularly good. I think it's a little bit of a better way of doing a double hero power in those classes than Blackwall Pixie. So, it's kind of 7 mana and you get a 4/4 instead of a 3/4. If you're just healing twice, of course, if you're healing twice, you can choose 2 different targets. Same with the, Mage hero power or any of those kind of things. So maybe in some of the odd decks, it also doubles the damage of your Sulfuras kind of hero power, the Rag hero power. But once again, you kind of only get to do it once rather than twice. So it's debatable as to which is better than Black Hole Pixie. But I'm going to give it a 1 as well. I think it's along the
I'm gonna
same
give
lines.
it 2, because there might be some shenanigans you can do with it. Like the fact that there might not be something now, but like the effect has potential. So that's kind of why I'm giving it a 2. Like, I don't think we'll see any play now, but I think that the double damage and double and healing of your hero power has some potential going forward.
Maybe. Next up, we have Dark Maya Moonkin. Dark Maya Moonkin's a 7 mana 2/8 with spell damage +2. The odd thing about this card is that
I see what you did there.
the previous it's definitely not for odd decks. The odd thing is with this card, the previous Moonkin we had, the Jungle Fire Moonkin or whatever it was, and the Druid one was a beast, and this isn't a beast. Whereas if it was a beast, it might have some interesting synergy with Witching Hour. But as it is, this card is just trash.
Yeah, 7 mana for 2/8, spell damage +2. No, thank you. I mean, the mage problem. Okay, so like before we just dismiss it, the main problem why I'm gonna say it's trash is for 7 mana. The problem is it's very difficult to combat anything of relevance. Let's say on turn 10. You don't want to. I mean, what 3 mana spell are you going to be playing? That really gets so much better because of spell damage +2, instead of playing it. Let's say spell damage +1 with Blood Mage Thalnos.
Yeah.
Like, you're paying 5 mana extra for spell damage +1. Well, extra spell damage.
I mean, we've seen the spell damage +2 effect on Evolved Kobold before.
That was 4 mana.
5 mana. I'm pretty sure, wasn't it? Wasn't it 5 mana 2/2? Anyway. Doesn't really matter. The point is that it was on a cheaper effect. The body is pretty irrelevant half the time. If you're doing this, you usually have some kind of combo you want to pull off with it. And even Evolved Kobold mostly saw play because Emperor Thaurissan could reduce the cost of it and the burn spells in your deck, in your hand, and Freeze Mage. So that's kind of why that worked. Dark Maya Moonkin doesn't really have any way to actually make it work.
Well, unless you get Emperor Thaurissan triggers like a bazillion times.
Yeah, unless you get Emperor Thaurissan off Toki, and I wouldn't ever bet on that one, at least in Standard.
But yeah, so it's a 1. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a 1 for me as well. Next up, we have Deranged Doctor. Deranged Doctor is an 8 mana 8/8 with Death Rattle, restore 8 health to your hero. Another card that's pretty decent from Spiteful Summoner, actually. 8/8 stats and an effect that's not completely irrelevant. It's pretty good off Spiteful Summoner. Otherwise, it's not a card you're ever really going to put in your deck, I don't think.
Just as a side note, like, Okay, so compared to the previous one, like the Moonkin, which is going to be trash even in arena, the ranged Doctor at least has what's going for it, as it will probably still be a solid late game drop in arena. Like I know we're not talking
Sure.
about arena, but just sort
Yeah.
of the differentiation between the last one. It's still trash and constructed though, so for me, I think it's definitely a 1 though. Like
Yeah,
you
I
never
definitely
want
think
to
it's a
play an
1.
8-mana 8/8.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
No,
Mostly
very minimal.
relevant, and most time you'll see it is going to be off Spiteful Summoner.
Yeah.
Next we have Fell Soul Inquisitor. This is a 4-mana 1/6 demon with Lifesteal and Taunt. Those are terrible stats for that mana cost. The demon tag is pretty irrelevant, except that some of the demon generation effects can kind of give it to you, like
And it's a neutral demon, right? Which I mean is quite unusual. I mean the only other one was the Void Ripper, I believe.
an Eladin.
Oh right, yeah. What I'm saying is there's not that many.
There's not many neutral demons. Yeah, I was thinking Cabal Trafficker could give it to you, but that's actually rotated out, so I don't even see Fell Soul Inquisitor ever coming from. Oh, you'll get offered to you with Demonic Possession,
Yeah.
the Warlock card, but like you're never picking it, so it's probably just bad for Demonic Possession.
Well, you might pick it when the other two options are really bad.
I mean, most of the demons are Warlock demons, so you are gonna get offered this one a lot less than those anyway. But yeah, you're never putting Fell Soul Inquisitor in your deck, so it's a 1.
The 1, yeah, 1.
Furious Etten, 7-mana 5/9 Taunt, like a bad neutral Ancient of War. Ancient of War isn't even good enough to see any play. Furious Etten is not good.
Yeah, it's a bad card. It's probably decent in arena, but like constructed wise, you never want to be playing a vanilla 7-mana 5/9 taunt. Thanks.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot better
Bog Champ.
impactful cards you want to be running.
Yeah, it's a reminiscent also of like a Bog Creeper, which is a 7-mana 6/8.
6/8. Yeah.
But yeah, Furious Etten, it's clearly a 1 in standard.
Yeah, and it's a pack filler.
Yeah. Next we have Hench Clan Thug. Hench Clan Thug is a 3-mana 3/3 common minion with after your hero attacks, give this minion +1/+1. This is a card that I think is actually very good. I think it could be easily kind of one of the sleepers or one of the most underrated cards from the final card dump. It's pretty easy in classes like Rogue, Hunter, Paladin, possibly even, and maybe even Warrior as well with the Woodcutter's Axe. I don't think you ever want to hero power in order to make this work. I think you always want to have a weapon. So I think in weapon classes is really where this card sees play.
Yeah.
I really don't think that it's good in Druid. But in those other classes, I think Hench Clan Thug is pretty good. A lot of the time it's a 3-mana 4/4. If you equip a Candle Shot on turn 1, or if you hero power on turn 2 with the Rogue, it's very easy for you to find a way to use that on turn 3. And then Hench Clan Thug is probably by far the best thing you can play, and it keeps growing after that as well.
Yeah, it's a 3-mana 4/4 that can just keep getting bigger.
Yeah, so I think Hench Clan Thug is pretty good, very important for any kind of aggro decks, and I think it could work very well for those decks to make sure they can control the board and then also just keep pushing face.
Yeah, and this thing can easily snowball out of control, right?
Yeah, so I think Hench Clan Thug is a 4 for me.
Yeah, I think it's a 4 as well.
Next up we have Lost Spirit. It's 2-mana 1/1 with Death Rattle, give your minions +1 attack. That's pretty pointless, I would say. That's just a 1, like its stat line.
Yeah, it's a 1. The impact is so terrible. I mean, the effect is so terrible. 2-mana 1/1 is terrible.
Yeah, let's move on.
Take this card away.
we have. Next up we have Marsh Drake. Marsh Drake, a 3-mana 5/4. It's a common and it's a dragon, and it has Battle Cry. Summon a 2/1 Poisonous Drake Slayer for your opponent. So this is a little similar to the Hench Clan Thug. I think it's a little bit worse than Hench Clan Thug in most of those decks, to be honest, because it certainly doesn't have the potential to grow afterwards, and you do have to sink your weapon specifically into the 2/1 rather than being able to use it wherever you want. But it's similar, where you can set it up with Candle Shot, you can set it up with a Rogue Dagger, and in Paladin as well, it helps with Cathedral Gargoyle. You can play Cathedral Gargoyle on 2 because you have Marsh Drake in your hand, and then you can play Marsh Drake on 2 and trade your Cathedral Gargoyle into the Poisonous Drake Slayer, or you can even maybe go face with the Cathedral Gargoyle will protect your Drake Slayer because it has Taunt. So there's some kind of applications that it works there, possibly even with, one drops trading into the 2/1. So I definitely think Marsh Drake is a very aggressive, stat line for 3 mana, 5/4. And I think if you can make that 2/1 work in a lot of those decks, it can be really powerful. It works a little bit differently. It doesn't really require a weapon as much as Hench Clan Thug. So for minions that play some like cheap minions that they can trade into the 2/1, they can make Marsh Drake work a bit better in those decks than Hench Clan Thug, and it kind of more immediately gets face damage. It'll be 5 on the first turn, 5 on the second turn if it's going face. Whereas Hench Clan Thug is kind of like 4 and then 5. But obviously will then kind of equal it when it's attacking for the third time at 6, in which case you're probably going to kill your opponent anyway.
Yeah, so I like Marsh Drake a lot. I think it's a 4.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's going to see quite a lot of play.
Yeah, I think it's definitely got a narrower application, though, than Hench Clan Thug in some ways. Because I'm not sure that the decks that want to trade a minion into it exist that much. But I
think it's wider because you think you don't have to, it's the condition isn't as narrow as the Hench Clan Thug.
I think it's definitely worse for Rogue to use the dagger on 2 into Marsh Drake. That I think Hench Clan Thug is better than Marsh Drake on 3 in Rogue, but you might play 1 Marsh Drake because you can't play 3 Hench Clan Thugs.
No.
For consistency, right? With the early drops, you want the consistency, and Marsh Drake is like a slightly worse Hench Clan Thug in a lot of these decks, and I think that you might see 1, even 2 of it in some of these kind of aggro variants of those classes. Next up, we have Pumpkin Peasant. Pumpkin Peasant's a 3 mana, 2/4 with lifesteal. It's a swappy card, so each turn it's in your hand, it swaps. So it's a 4/2 or a 2/4. Both sides are terrible. No thank you, 1.
Yeah, no thank you, 1. I would not play 3 mana, 2/4 lifesteal, 3 mana, 4/2 lifesteal. No thank you.
Okay. Moving on, we have Ravencaller. Ravencaller, 3 mana, 2/1 with Battlecry. Add 2 random 1-cost minions to your hand. We spoke about this in one of our impression videos. The only reason you would want this is some kind of token deck. I don't think that deck exists. I don't think Ravencaller is even that good in that deck. It's certainly not something that will push you into that archetype. I think, like the minions it gives you, it's a 1.
Yeah, I think it's a 1. I mean, a 3 mana 2/1, I think is just too terrible.
Yeah. Next up, we have Rotten Applebaum. Rotten Applebaum is a 5 mana 4/5 with Taunt, Death Rattle. Taunt and Death Rattle, restore 4 health to your hero. So obviously meant to be quite a defensive card, understated for 5 mana arguably, but it does come with Taunt and that Death Rattle effect. I think the biggest downside for Rotten Applebaum is that N'Zoth is rotating out. I think it would have been a pretty good card to bring back with N'Zoth in a lot of those decks. But now I'm not really seeing the application as much for Rotten Applebaum.
I think it's just an all-around solid minion. I mean, you can fetch with Contessa. It's one of those mid-range cards that can kind of just bridge the gap from the early game, and help you just stay alive that much longer. So for me, I think I'm gonna give it a 3.
Yeah.
For me, it's a high 3 though. Like it's close to a 4.
For me, I'm also gonna give it a 3, but it's more of a low 3 for me. I think. I think in a lot of people's collections, it'll be their cheap defensive card. If they don't have maybe some of the more premium ones. And so I think it might see some play, but overall, right now with the synergies that exist, I'm not really that convinced. But it is pretty decent on the other hand. It just suffers a lot of silence, which is quite popular right now, and that's one of the big things that is going to be against it. Next up we have Spell Shifter. Spell Shifter is a 2 mana 1/4 with spell damage +1, and it's a swappy card. So each turn it's in your hand, swap its attack and health. 2 mana 1/4 with spell damage is actually not bad. A 2 mana 4/1 is horrible. And I think the thing with spell damage is you kind of want to combo it with a spell on particular turns. And Spell Shifter doesn't really give you that opportunity because you have to kind of more specifically plan to do it only on alternating turns where you kind of might have the better 1/4 body left behind.
And the fact that Blood Mage Thanos is a classic card, I would rather play Blood Mage Thanos over this every day. And even if you don't have Blood Mage Thanos, I'll play, Kobold?
Kobold Geomancer.
I'll play Kobold Geomancer nearly every time instead of this nonsense.
That's true. Blood Mage comes with the card draw as well. So.
Yeah.
And
is a Death Rattle.
And is a Death Rattle with Countess.
I mean, yeah. if we even, let's say, I would play Bloodmage Thanos first and foremost, but I'm saying even if you're a budget player or don't have all the legendaries, I would still play Kobold Geomancer over Spellshifter every day.
And I'd probably play Tainted Zealot over Spellshifter too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another comment. So, yeah, Spellshifter, that's going to be a 1. Next we have Swamp Dragon Egg. Swamp Dragon Egg is a 1-mana 0/3 with Death Rattle, add a random dragon to your hand. So, unlike some of the previous eggs, this one doesn't actually have any impact on the board, which I think is a big problem. One of the best things that a lot of those old eggs like Nerubian Egg did, and now we have what's the
Runic Egg. It's Runic Egg.
No, Runic Egg's rotating out. This is kind of like Runic Egg, but the 3-mana egg, the dinosaur one from Agora, Devilsaur Egg, that's it. Which leaves back 5/5. This one, it doesn't really help you if they AoE you. They're still going to clear your board and you're not going to have anything left, right? Which is one of the best things that some of these kind of eggs did to protect your board against AoE. It puts a dragon in your hand. In most, like, let's say aggro decks where you want to make this work, put a random dragon in your hand is not going to be good. There's a lot of expensive dragons that are just not good at all in those decks. I don't think random dragons are necessarily that good. It can help you activate some synergies. Yeah, but Bone Drake is different because you're playing Bone Drake when you want value, and when you want value, an extra dragon is good. But in the decks where you want to protect your board from board clear, you don't want value. So I really don't think the extra dragon is good in those decks. So for me, Swamp Dragon Egg is a 1. Yeah.
Yeah, 1.
Next up, we have Swamp Leech. Swamp Leech is a 1-mana 2/1 beast with lifesteal. Only relevant for Deathstalker Rexar, which will be updated to include this as well as the Kobold and Catacombs beasts. I think it's really good for Deathstalker Rexar, and other than that, I have nothing to say. You won't play it.
Yeah, you don't want this in your deck. 1.
Lifesteal is irrelevant on turn 1.
Direwolf is, Diremaul is just better, right?
It's just lifesteal is irrelevant on turn 1, and this is not a body that will stick to do anything relevant in the later turns.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is that it's quite a good stat line to get added to a minion when you have Deathstalker Rexar.
Yeah.
Next up we have Swift Messenger. Swift Messenger is a 4-mana 2/6 rush, and it's a swappy card as well, so it swaps. This is maybe one of the slightly better. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm gonna give the Swamp Leech a 1 as well. I don't even think we mentioned that, but that was a pretty obvious one. Haha. Next we have Swift Messenger. So 2/6 with rush or a 6/2 with rush. The 6/2 is kind of probably better a lot of the time, but at 4 mana there's probably better removal options you can find in a lot of classes. It's not hard to deal 4 damage for 4 mana in a lot of classes, and those kind of spells, at least they don't worry, or let's say they can go through taunt, where Swift Messenger can't.
I give it I'll give it a 2 because I think there are the fringe where you want to deal the 6 damage specifically, you know.
Yeah.
But the fact that I'm not convinced on it because the fact that it swaps at every turn, it makes it very difficult for you to get the value. You can only really use it optimally every second turn.
Yeah, I think right now this might be the second choice or the opted for choice sometimes to combine with Countess Ashmore over Muck Hunter, and that's kind of the only reason I'm going to give it a 2 as well. I think you can also use 2 Swift Messengers to kill Tyrantus if they're at 6 attack. That's yay, removal for Tyrantus, which will be relevant because of Spiteful Summoner. But Swift Messenger 2. Next we have Tanglefur Mystic. Tanglefur Mystic is a 3-mana 3/4 common with Battle Cry, add a random 2-cost minion to each player's hand. So we kind of saw this in the reveal stream, used in the Hand Druid deck. Maybe sometimes against Warlock you can give them a 2-cost and then burn 1 card.
Yeah, the fact that it's symmetrical makes me very iffy about it. So you need some value. I can see it. For me, it's 2 for I don't know how to assess because giving each player a 2-cost minion could be good, could be bad. I'm not sure.
I think the nice thing is that it can facilitate Hand Druid because it's a card you can play on the board. that doesn't remove a card from your hand in a way. It kind of replaces itself in your hand, even if that card it puts in your hand is bad, like most of the hand druid cards that put cards in your hand. So I think for that reason, I kind of like Tangleful Mystic, maybe in that deck. But even in that deck, I think it'll be Fringe. So I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah, 2 as well.
Next up, we have Unpowered Steambot, 4 mana, 0/9 Taunt. This is terrible. Yes, Lady in White. No, I'm never putting this in any deck. I don't care about Lady in... Like, Lady in White will never encourage me to put this in the deck.
This is a massive trap. Warning to new players. This is a card you almost never want to put in your deck. The fact that it's 0 attack means it's never ever fighting back or anything.
Everything value trades with it.
Everything just kills it, basically. And, I mean, basically, it's almost like saying 4 mana, gain 9 health, which would be a terrible card.
Yep. So Unpowered Steambot is going to be a 0. Oh, sorry, a 1 from me.
No, 1, and if it was 0, yeah.
If we didn't have a 0, it would. Next, we have Vicious Scalehide. Vicious Scalehide is a 2 mana 1/3 beast with Lifesteal and Rush. Another card that's mostly relevant for Deathstalker Rexar. Having Lifesteal and Rush on a single card is really good, and the stats add well to any other kind of decently statted minion. I mean, even if you just add it with like a Bloodfen Raptor and you get a 4 mana 4/5 Lifesteal Rush, that's pretty good in a Deathstalker Rexar deck where you can then control the board and gain back life. So I think that's the only relevance that Vicious Scalehide will have.
As a 2-drop, it's a bit underwhelming, I think. The 1 attack, I don't think it's that relevant. I mean, maybe if it could get some sort of buffs, maybe in Paladin could be a thing, but for me, it's a 2.
Yeah, I kind of maybe toyed with the idea of it in Paladin as well because it can come off Call to Arms and have some immediate effect at least. So maybe in that deck it could see some play. But yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 2 as well. I'm not really sure. Other than that, it's Quest Rogue that I thought about that could maybe use it. But it can't go face, and you rather want charge more than rush 90% of the time in Quest Rogue because you want to go face with your 5/5s. It is a very good kind of recovery tool against aggro decks for Quest Rogue. And it can often just like ping something, heal you for 1, and then you bounce it. But I'm not really sure that that's going to be a solid game plan for Quest Rogue. So I'm going to give it a 2 as well. I think it's fringe in any of those kind of decks we're talking about. Next up, we have Walnut Sprite. Walnut Sprite is a 3 mana 3/3 Echo. That's all. So it's a 3 mana 3/3. You can play as many times as you want. In standard, I see no real use for this card, so I'm going to give it a 1.
For me, I'm also going to give it 1. And also, most times, if you do ever want to play Echo, I'm quite sure you'd rather be playing the Phantom Militia of a 2/4 Taunt instead of a 3/3.
Yeah.
A lot of times. So, I mean, this is another reason why this is definitely a 1 for me.
Yeah, I thought about this for Quest Rogue as well because Echo naturally fits well with the quest. But at 3 mana, it's probably a little bit too expensive. Rogue doesn't have any 2 mana Echo minions, otherwise they would be pretty good for Quest Rogue. At 3 mana, it's just too slow to complete the quest, I think. So I'm not convinced by a Walnut Sprite there. But that is maybe the one application I could see for it. Finally,
even then, would you rather not play the Phantom Militia still?
Or Face Collector.
Face Collector or Phantom Militia.
Yeah, because the stat line is irrelevant on it. I'd rather play Phantom Militia, because it has taunt. So, yeah. Even in that deck, I'd rather play Phantom Militia over Walnut Sprite. Finally, we have Wormguard. So Wormguard is a 7 mana 3/11 with Battle Cry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and taunt. I'm not convinced the dragon deck is there for most classes, and in most classes I don't really want to play Wormguard anyway. Even if we're getting a 7 mana 4/11 taunt, I don't want that. No, thank you. So Wormguard is going to be a 1 from me, actually. I just think it's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, like we said with Dragon decks, I think if and when Dragon decks become a thing, I think it might be a 2, because I think it might be a sort of a tool that the Dragon decks might need to have aggro, but it's probably too slow, so for me it's probably a 2, leaning closer to a 1, I think. I initially thought it was actually pretty good, and then I realized, when I thought about it more, I was like, no, you probably might just, the taunt is not that relevant by turn 7, because you might just be dead.
Yeah, and if they've got minions on the board, often they're going to trade into it favorably. because it doesn't have, even with the buff, it's only 4 attack. And yeah, you have to have the dragon in your hand to even give it taunt. If it had taunt naturally and just got the attack buff, it would be a bit more useful. But this way around, no. And that is the final neutral card we have, which kind of brings us to an end to the Witchwood reviews. Please feel free to share them and comment. And you can also find us on Twitter at PandemoniaZA and at dib_gaming. So make sure to check us out there, and give us any feedback. Feedback's always appreciated. If you have some cool uses for any of these cards we've mentioned, or want to comment on any of the deck lists that we had, please comment on either the appropriate videos with the deck lists or the cards, or the neutrals one here. Comments are always really appreciated, and yeah, thanks for sticking with us for all of these videos. This one in particular was quite a long one because we had quite a few neutral cards to go through. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed the series, and thanks a lot. Cheerio.
Cheers.